Up next, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to get set and get into another important conversation. In today's global landscape, questions of sovereignty, security, diplomacy, and economic resilience have become more important than ever. Our next session is titled The New Geopolitics Reimagining the Sovereign Nation. And to take this forward, ladies and gentlemen, please, with a very warm round of applause, let's welcome onto the stage someone who brings valuable international perspective on diplomacy, global partnerships, and the evolving geopolitical landscape. Let's welcome the Ambassador of Italy to India, His Excellency Antonio Enrico Bartoli. Joining him on the panel is an economist whose work has significantly influenced public policy conversations in India. Let's welcome member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, Dr. Shamika Ravi. And to get the best out of this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, please keep the applause going as we welcome onto the stage the award-winning journalist, author, talk show host, founder and editor-in-chief of ThePrint, Mr. Shekhar Gupta. Over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Am I audible? Should I put this one up? This one up? Sorry, not yours. I'll speak the mic. I won't steal the mic. You can drop it if you wish. You know, but drop the mic. Drop the mic moment. That'll make the day for Sunil. So thank you both for being here. The theme is uncertain times, confident choices. India recalibrates, and then it says moderator brief for me, which says the new geopolitics reimagining the sovereign nation. Now, there was a time about 25 years ago, that one of the professors I worked with and who taught me a fair bit, he said that I'm putting a ban on any paper on strategic affairs that begins with the line, since the end of the Cold War and decline of nationalism. Because he said wars will come back and nationalism will come back. It was, in fact, more than 30 years ago. So it was quite prescient. Now all of this is back. Now, how do I explain this? Shamika will understand this. I will do with best effort translation, although translation from Hindi to English is bad enough, difficult enough, but Urdu to English is even tougher because it has nuances. So in 1950, there was a Hindi film. I look at life through Hindi film music and cricket, right? Both of which are alien to our friend here. But 1950 film called Babul, which had a duet between Suraya and Talat Mahmood that said, "Dunya badal gayi, meri dunya badal gayi, टुकड़े हुए जिगर के छुरी दिल पे चल गई." That my entire world is transformed. It's as if somebody took out a dagger and cut my heart into pieces, right? So that's what's happened to the world right now. Because we are in a situation where we had 80 years of progress towards rule-based order. Rule-based order, multilateralism, there were groups, there was the UN, such as it was, but Security Council was reasonably coherent. Then there was the G7, G20, NATO, World WTO, and all of these global organizations. All of these have been appended. All of these have been appended. Donald Trump has decided that America is at a disadvantage when it deals with a group. It may be EU, it may be NATO, it may be G7, anybody. But when America deals with other countries one-on-one, it's that much stronger. So it will only deal with other countries bilaterally. And in that process, all of Africa, most of Africa, barring South Africa, where Elon Musk is involved, and most of Asia then gets completely ignored. Now, in this world, let me start with you, Ambassador Antonio. Italy, this is the middle of Europe. You have concerns and insecurities. Do you feel friendless? And if so, what is the new search now? How do you, no country lets things drift, least of all Italy. So how do you look at this world, and where does the sovereign state rediscover itself? This sovereign state being Italy, in your case.
Thank you. There is no doubt that we are living uncertain times, but I think you cannot build without being an optimist. And I think that challenges are also opportunities. The Western world is not a monolith. And the last moves of the American administration have demonstrated that. But there is a positive side in it, because it's if you want, I'm blunt, is a wake-up call for Europe towards what is called strategic autonomy, which means that the capacity, having the capabilities, the awareness, the tools, and the resources to identify and pursue your interests without depending on anybody. And I think it's also a fair thing, because we cannot ask 330 million people, the Americans, taking care of the security of 450, and even more if you consider UK, Turkey, and so on. So I think it's not a question of dismantling, for example, NATO. It's a question of cultivating in action more concrete and actual strategic autonomy. Of course, this entails some ambitious steps, both from the institutional point of view. We have, as Europe, I'm talking from the European perspective, we have to make it more efficient in decision making. We have to be innovative. We have to simplify, so simplification for the administrative point of view, but also if you talk about security in terms of common standards, ensuring interoperability. When I say innovative, for example, the escape clause is very important, not to consider investments in security as an expenditure, rather as an investment, and so not factoring these in the deficit GDP calculation. And this is meaningful from the economic but also the conceptual point of view. And of course, it's not only a question of security, it's a question of political role. Europe has to engage more with other countries and acquiring a more profiled political role. And this entails a stronger relationship with India. We are not just, which is very significant, having concluded the FTA, but we signed, for example, a security partnership. We are talking with India about critical minerals. We are talking about artificial intelligence. We are talking about collaboration in third countries, like Africa, that you mentioned. So I think this entails, on a way, not dismantling, but building a stronger European pillar without NATO, for example. And on the other side, interacting more and more with non-EU actors that are significant to us and are friendly countries.
Shamika, geoeconomics is the new geopolitics, at least for now. And just that little passage, Strait of Hormuz, has demonstrated that to us. Because without that, Iran would have lost the war completely. It's just that leverage that's got Iran going, because it's not just leverage with the economics of the rest of the world, particularly Asia, but it's also leverage with the economics of the Arab world, which in any case has fancy armies that never want to fight, that have never fought except sometimes their own. So in this situation, you have tariffs being used as leverage. Supply chains are now strategies. Chinese used it with the Americans, when the Trump put tariffs on them. Energy is a weapon. So India is both a target and beneficiary. If you would explain how it's a target and how it's a beneficiary.
Thank you, Shekhar, and thank you to the Hero Group. It's a great privilege to be here with Antonio and Shekhar. We have to realize that there are lots of big structural changes happening at the same time, Shekhar. But India's growth, since we are talking about sovereignty and where it fits in, we have to recognize that comparisons with a China or a Japan or a South Korea is quite limited. Because unlike these export-oriented growth models, India's growth has fundamentally been on the back of its domestic demand. And that is the strategic strength, or that one factor which gives you tremendous leverage, which is the reason why whenever there's been large global shock, either in the form of COVID or in the case of the trade wars, now subsequent two wars, our economy isn't as badly hit as these export markets. I think it's very important to recognize that. That's number one. Number two, if you look at, again, loss of sovereignty and, how growth impacts sovereignty, Japan is under $40,000 per capita. But at its peak, it was around 9-10. By then, it had already attained 15,000 PPP terms. So there was considerable growth. Korea was the same story, though Korea prevailed longer. Even today, they have growth which is in excess of 2%. So Korea is now easily 10,000 more than Japan in PPP terms. If you look against these two export-oriented markets, if you look at China, then China's peak was around 11-12%, but they were only $5,500 per capita PPP. And since that, they have steadily been falling. So if you look at the decadal 5-year moving average, which we tend to look, not every year, but if you look at the smooth long-term growth, China today, its growth rate is half of what it was 12 years back. Now, the thing to note is, of course, we keep looking at the US and, the US policies because we're living in the midst of that. But unlike South Korea and Japan, Shekhar, China has an army. And it has articulated its ambitions in many ways, right? Now, against that, when we think of our own growth model, we are not going to grow like South Korea and Japan, because both these countries had considerable erosion of sovereignty. But of course, in the process, they gained a lot of technology and growth, right? For us, therefore, every deal, every trade deal, every agreement we enter is keeping at heart the fact that we are a domestic demand-driven economy. And the second is our objectives are, because we are an electoral democracy, loud, there are some objectives which take precedence. Number one, reducing poverty. And I think it's important to recognize, Sunil is not here, but he mentioned poverty is our topmost priority today. It is, but please recognize we had 30% poverty rate 12 years back. If you look at the Rangarajan poverty line, which is moderate poverty, it's higher than $2.15 World Bank. So we had 29.5 to be precise poverty rate 12 years back. Today it is 3.9. So it's still 3.9 of 1.48 billion is still a large number, but please appreciate the relative decline on the back of this growth that we have had. So for us, I think the way the institutions are structured and our domestic demand, by the way, reduction of poverty has also led to a rapid increase in consumption at the bottom of the pyramid. If you look at the bottom 40% and the kind of consumption, so our consumption story is not just the top 20%, which is what a lot of the media unfortunately focuses on. So please appreciate that this changing nature of domestic demand in India, I think we have to understand it really well to then appreciate why our response to these global shocks, whether it is the current energy crisis or, for instance, even earlier the trade war between China and the US, have been very distinct from other economies.
Well, those are good points to think through. Ambassador, if I may come to you, Europe is rearming, recalibrating, and also looking at its American dependence again. Now, short question. Is this temporary? Are you also counting backwards? There is something on internet called the Trump clock. And when I get really hassled, I go to it and I see the seconds running out. And I know that his time is finite. It will ultimately run out. 2.5 years. So are you looking at there is this recalibration in Europe as a 2.5-year thing? That after Trump, life will be back to normal? Or you think it will never be back to normal?
No, I think we were talking about security. I think that we enjoyed three main factors that are no more there. There was the cheap energy from Russia, the export outlet to China, and the security umbrella from the United States, which was not a Boy Scout action. It was a win-win strategy, because this has to be debunked, that was only in one direction. But in any case, I don't believe in a Trump clock, in the sense that as also the passage between Trump 1 and Biden administration has demonstrated, there are some factors that are doomed to remain, because it's difficult to go backwards. And my point is that it's not necessarily a bad news. I think it's if it's a stimulus towards more autonomy and independence for Europe, I think is very good. To pick up on Shamika arguments, yes, as is in all things, there is also a flip side. So I think that is good to be more domestically driven rather than export-led, but can be also a weakness, in the sense that if these, as happened till now, then translates into basically a protectionist attitude, this prevents, in a way, from the country from developing much more. For example, the manufacturing sector, and to be tempted to rely too much on big guys, both internally and externally. So big guys, big corporations. While I think that India needs more and more an inclusive growth, and so the development of a network of small and medium enterprises. Because the point is that not if India grows, of course it grows, but if it grows enough to absorb the offer of labor. And I think that this move towards free trade agreements is being the WTO dead. It's in any case a very positive move also in this direction, because I think that trade is also a big driver for investments. Otherwise, the investments will simply go elsewhere. And these regards also a system like ours, that the Italian economic system is made 90% of small and medium enterprises. And so by being encouraged to trade, they can think of investing more. While on the opposite side, if they are prevented from knowing this market, knowing the partners, testing the waters, they will be induced to go, I don't know, the ASEAN countries that are less complicated.
So I'll ask you if, a follow-up before I go to Shamika. These strategic partnerships, India, Italy, India, Europe, besides symmetry and besides the what I might call as tamasha, what do they lead to? Because so far it doesn't look like that when chips are down, anybody speaks for anybody. Definitely, we haven't seen anybody speak for India very much over the last couple of years, because everybody seems so scared of Trump right now that nobody wants to take any chances.
No, I'm less pessimistic in the sense I truly believe that I mean, the term strategic is very much abused, but I do think that
That's what
India
I
and Europe,
wanted you to come to.
yeah, and India, Europe, and India, Italy, as like other European countries, is a truly strategic partnership, because it's in the, you know, I appreciate and I'm glad of toffee diplomacy. I mean, Melody hashtag is very successful. Of course, it's good insofar there is something behind the toffees, and I think there is. It's good to have a personal chemistry between the prime ministers, because it's very important in contemporary politics. But it's important that this is matched by actual convergences. And I think, for example, to take the example of my country, that there are. I mean, we are two democracies. We are heirs to ancient civilization. This is not rhetoric. We are peninsulas, so we are naturally interested in connectivity. In IMEC, for example, that is actually the re-edition of what existed 2,000 years ago at the time of Emperor Augustus, because there was, thanks to the monsoon, there was a thriving trade between Rome and India. We share a common vision of the global order. Talking about manufacturing, you want to develop manufacturing. We are the second largest industrial powerhouse in Europe. So you see that the convergences are objective. And so I think that it's not a temporary or episodical enthusiasm.
Or personal. Shamika, you talked about the strength of India's internal market, which is true, because we have all these unbuilt hospitals, unbuilt schools and colleges, unbuilt highways, unbuilt railways, unbuilt airports, frankly, also unbuilt tanks and fighter aircraft and submarines, right? So India has a lot to build. But underneath all this is also balance of trade, capital account. For that, you need a lot of foreign exchange to come in. We carry a big deficit, that goods, enormous deficit. It's partly made up for by services, which somehow in the popular discourse right now being demonized as if it doesn't matter, which I'm sure you will agree is not right, because it's not one or the other, but also our ability to attract capital. That has suffered in the past 10 years, and I know some corrections are being carried out now. How soon can these corrections start showing impact? And when do we see capital again returning both to the capital markets and to real businesses as in durable FDI?
So before I take your question, a response to Antonio in terms of the protection, there are different kinds of protection, right? If you look at the last 10 years, and this is global trade alert data, which looks at protectionist policies that countries put up. The US has brought in close to 9,700 protectionist policies. China has brought in around 7,700. You know how many protectionist policies India has brought in? 1,900. That's number one. Number two, simultaneously, while you put protectionist policy, you're also doing trade liberalizing policies. And there India has, perhaps because we had a lot more to do, has outdone all other major, let's say, 10 economies in trade liberalizing policy. Now, why is it that we still believe that Indian policies are largely protectionist? It's because the nature of the protection is very different in the US and China. They do it in the form of export subsidies. They do it in the form of early fixed costs, where they're bearing a lot of, the government is giving a lot of support. In our case, a disproportionately large number of those 1,900 policies, almost 27% of that, is tariff, which is visible and which is easy for people to catch and think and build a narrative.
Or non-tariff barriers.
Yes.
You are also good at
But
non-tariff
Shekhar, non-tariff barrier.
Quality control
I mean,
orders.
what do you think today when President Trump says forced labor? These are all not,
I know,
right?
but those are the QCOs
Yes.
which we are now burning up.
Yes, but we have reverse. I mean, recognizing.
I'm saying that.
So
I'm
if you
acknowledging
see
that.
the view that a country is protectionist while the other countries are paragons of free trade, Shekhar, to your 80 years of rule of law, sorry, it was 80 years of rule by law, where when the law suited you, you used it, and otherwise you looked away. I mean, we see what happened with WTO. We see 25 years. Now, of course, the chickens are coming home to roost, so we are talking a different language. But please, let's not forget history. And we're all, old enough to remember last 30 years and what has happened in trade, particularly in the guise of free trade. Now, to your questions of regarding what are we doing to get capital back? Now, it's very important to understand that the current shrill public debate around net FDI. Remember, it's net FDI, so there are multiple components to it. The inflow, Shekhar, if you look, is steadily rising. In fact, today, the inflow into India is at an all-time high. But so is the outflow, which is why your net is low. Acha, now, do you want to restrict outflow? No, you do not. It has taken us 25 years of reforms to get to a stage where we are saying you make money, and if you want to repatriate, that's okay. At the same time, if Indian industry wants to acquire technology outside, that's okay too. So to think that Indian industry buying outside, which shows in your outflow, is a loss of capital, I think it's a very myopic way to look at it. When an economy matures, this is exactly what happens. The net FDI is going to peter down because you're also going to see Indian industry go out, which, by the way, is great in current situation where acquiring technology outside is perhaps one of the best ways to do technology transfers, because our R&D is still pretty low, and so these are like leapfrog, and we support that. Now, but we also have to recognize, Shekhar, and you know this better than me, that there are structural issues that we are still, which is like the gorilla in the room, and we have to acknowledge it for what it is. In ease of doing business, because manufacturing and a lot of these capital flows, particularly FDIs, are impacted by ease of doing business. In ease of doing business, in the last 10 years, we have gone from 162 to 47. In ease of contract enforcement, we remain at 163. So now we are also, by the way, internalizing the fact that it's impossible to get a contract enforced, and if it does, can we figure out a way out? See, these are the kind of inefficiencies. So I'm getting to, mostly what I'm trying to get to is judicial reforms, the kind of delays. A recent study we did, we estimated that the delay and the cost to real estate project, because there was also talk on real estate before, is close to 40% on account of litigation. You see, these are the structural realities which are the real constraints to our 6.5, 7.5. Why are we not getting beyond that? I think those are the bigger problems we ought to handle.
Yeah, I think contract enforcement is an important one. I will break the rule a little bit, and I will If anybody has questions, I will take about 2 questions from the audience. If you do have one, please raise your hand and say who this is addressed to. But that's optional. I will not come to somebody and say ask a question. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. I will come to you. Do you have any advice for India, Antonio? I know ambassadors don't go to other countries to advise them. But India and Italy, as you know, have a deep and diverse and a complex connection.
I was trying to hint at that we are all admirative of the capacity to grow and to reduce poverty and to make a lot of headways, even in the technological domain. I understand the arguments of Shakira. I don't think we can depict India as a champion of free trade, frankly speaking, and that's why we welcome with great satisfaction for example, a long-standing negotiation that has been concluded with Europe and with other countries towards liberalization, and that was exactly what I was trying to say. Of course, for a country, I mean, if you have Google, if you have Amazon, of course they will. If you have Apple, they will come anyway because they know that they are going to sell their iPhones or deliver their goods. But if you have a structure of small and medium enterprises, these small and medium enterprises want to sell before investing, because only if they sell good and they find the market interesting, they will be induced to establish, through a joint venture, a productive facility. We have almost 1,000 companies operating in India. Half of them have productive facilities. But there could be many more if the market could be more open. And I think this would be and will be one of the very positive effects of the free trade agreement, because it will also entail new investments, the kind of investments that, in my opinion, India needs to make this growth, of course, inclusive, because it's good to say we are the fifth, we are the sixth, we are the fourth, but then if you divide by 1.4, the per capita income is still there. Yes. So to make it more inclusive, I think you need not only the big guys, you need small and medium enterprises. And that's when Italy fits in, because I think we have the industrial capacity, we have the structure of small and medium enterprises, and the technological know-how to partner with defense, for example, is a great example. We signed, we adopted, that was announced by the Prime Minister, a roadmap to design and build together. For you is an advantage. For us, it's a big advantage, because we can do it bigger, faster, and cheaper. So more capacity, economies of scale, and also the rapidity we cannot find in Europe.
You know, you talk about Italy. Let me also bring in Europe, because the FTA is there. And European bureaucracy, we keep cursing our bureaucracy. But our bureaucracy is a walk in the park compared to your bureaucracy. You destroyed one free trade agreement just the other day over some carbon something, I forget what. How sure are we that somebody will not stand up and set this one on fire? And also, every time somebody from Europe goes and signs something with Pakistan, with one line that equates in some ways, because Pakistanis twist it, and Europeans are smart, so why should they why should they sign on that twisted line? In the same para, they put Ukraine and they put Kashmir, right? You realize what it means in India, right? I think India's left Pakistan way behind and we should be done with it. But why should Europe, if it has such a stake with India, only Europe does it? Americans don't do it. Only Europe does it and China does it. No other country does it. It's true.
I would like to remind
UAE doesn't do it. Saudi Arabia
the peace with Iran has
Saudi
just
Arabia,
been announced by the Pakistani Prime Minister. So
Saudi Arabia
you cannot underestimate the relationship between the US and Pakistan. And I don't want to delve into the Pakistan issue, and I understand all the sensitivities. One point is clear, that if we say that we believe in a multilateral order and in the strength of the law, rather than in the law of
Shamika,
the strong people, if we define that in each occasion there is an aggressor and a victim, for example, in the Russia case, there was an evident aggressor. And India didn't take stance.
In case of Kashmir, who's the evident aggressor?
No, that's the point. You cannot pretend that others take stance while you don't do on other things.
I think the issue is only the reference in this issue, is the mention in the same reference. Ukraine should be settled. Kashmir should find a resolution. That's what I'm saying. It's not a good ring in India. Shamika, in this crisis-ridden world, are there opportunities? We are only talking of crisis. Are there opportunities?
Big one, Shekhar. And I think the biggest that we have is our population, young population. Europe, does the right thing, having exhausted all the bad options, and I think eventually aging, and I think aging is one of those real problems that most OECD nations are facing. But, I think that is one opportunity for us, because we do envisage India becoming the human resource capital of the world. It's not just in terms of engineers and doctors, but increasingly in terms of the entire value chain in the labor market. And for us, it is great because many of our state economies, for instance, if you look at Kerala, Kerala's very large part of Kerala's GNP is on account of remittances. Similarly, it is also for Bihar, by the way. It is the youngest state, and its GNP is significantly larger than the GDP because a lot of Biharis migrate and work outside. And all of that gets reflected in consumption back home. And eventually, growth is about having a better quality of life. So I think our young people, we just have to prepare, continue with this skilling mission, which is one other structural impediment we have to overcome, that we do have an enormous shortage of skilled manpower. And the demand there far exceeds the supply in the market, because almost all our industry surveys tell us that industries are repeatedly reporting that the constraint to their expansion growth is not capital. They're able to raise the capital. Most of them are flushed with cash. It's skilled manpower that is keeping them back. And I think, human resource is that, that big opportunity for us. The second, I think, how India has already used technology, but the chances are how we are likely to. There is some degree of frustration I see, sometimes even within the government, but definitely outside, that, we are nowhere in AI, and, what you alluded to in the beginning as well. But AI also has so many different layers, Shekhar. Almost all big applications and at scale, all of that is going to happen here. China is not going to change anytime soon. Another thing to recognize that, when you have a repressed domestic demand, which is what the Chinese have, right? They are growing, but almost 70% of that GDP sits with the government or the corporations. Here, it's the reverse. Almost 70% sits with private consumption. Now, that itself signifies, which is again the population and the way our economy is structured. wonderful things for the future, because you can't always preempt how this economy, it's almost self-sustaining in many ways. Of course, if we get the competitive nature of things back, industry has to be competitive. We have to raise labor productivity, those things, ease of doing business, courts playing ball. But on the whole, I think India's weight in the global growth is only going to increase, as it has in the last 30 years. And it's largely on the back of young people.
Let me make quick points. First, as an example of how articulated is this strategic partnership, both with Europe and with bilateral level. We have agreements now on critical minerals, on nurses, mobility and nurses. I do agree that this is a strategic move. On defense, on ports collaboration. We are about to create a fast-track corridor between Italy and India, and so on and so on. Science and technology, we will open an innovation center in India. We have dialogue on spanning from science to counterterrorism, maritime security, mobility. So it's really a 360-degree partnership. On AI, we need to partner also because we are democracies. For democracies, is a little bit more difficult to develop AI in a proper way, because for a dictatorship they have no privacy issues. They have, they can experience that on large scale without any hurdles. And that's why it's important that we partner on this.
Sunil, you have an intervention or a question?
I do, but I don't know how much time you have left for this
session. No, we have time. We have 5 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Ambassador, if I may ask you a question about Europe itself, not just India, Italy, but within Europe, do you ever see a time when the European countries can actually look at things in a similar fashion? At this moment, they are so uniquely different, culturally, economically, technically, that very often their views are at odds with each other rather than having a common view. And many of these things end up in Brussels, therefore, to find a common view. Is there any work being done to bring little more commonality there? And I'm going to fire one at you as well, Shamika, if you're okay. Sorry, I'll just get them both out, Shekhar, if you're okay. In rural India, we have close to 54% of the population depending directly on agriculture as a primary source of income. And that's contributing less and less to the GDP. How do we get people off agriculture? And if we do, where do we actually deploy them? Can we create a non-agri rural economy and not have massive migration to the urban centers? Because urban centers themselves have their own challenges. While it's a fantastic opportunity to build them out, but that takes time. Can we create the point I mentioned about crafts and artisanal skill was actually for this very reason? Is there a practical possibility of doing that?
Two very tough questions. On Europe, I think that we need some fresh rules to make our decision-making process more effective. For example, majority voting on some issues, including foreign policy. We need a real common defense policy, which doesn't mean to buy American weapons with European money. It means to produce together tanks or missiles or whatever it takes. And I think that, talking in general terms, we should also simplify the structure, because people don't understand very well even inside the president of the commission, the president of the council, so having one figure elected directly, as well as a parliament that has a legislative initiative, which is not the case for Europe. So there is a problem of rules and reforms. I'm quite confident because Europe has always been like that, and we had made a tremendous headway, and this stimuli will push us towards reform. And I'm not so pessimistic. Of course, there are divergences, but our motto is exactly the one of India: is united in diversity. And I do believe that there is a European conscience and awareness in the European populations.
Shamika?
So, Sunil, if you look at the data, majority of migration happens within the district from the rural to the urban centers. In fact, if you look at satellite data, unlike the census data, which is now 15 years old, India is anywhere between 67 and 70% urban already. Which is why the next big phase of growth for India has to come from urban planning. It has to. And our urban centers are no longer big cities or even tier 2 or tier 3. They're really the tier 4s and the peri-urban, or now what we call urban, and so on and so forth. So the quality of life improvement and the new opportunities in terms of work and so on will happen when we begin to first bring about all of these reforms which are linked with urbanization. In some ways, it started with the announcement of the Urban Fund, which is a lakh crore. Of course, that is just finance part of it, and even that is not enough. Eventually, one structural constraint right now that we have to overcome is the fact that many areas want to remain panchayats. Because National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, National Rural Livelihood Mission, National Rural, there are just so many schemes focused on rural areas that loss of the rural tag is seen as a loss of power and wealth and so on. In fact, to most of you, since we are sitting in NCR, the millennial city of Gurgaon was being governed by panchayats until 2008. And you know what had happened till 2008, Gurgaon was already a city. But the administration was still panchayats. That's the kind of dissonance we live with. And I think instead of making rural areas better, we really have to put all our energy into making our cities and everything that we call urban today just better, with solid waste management, water supply, gas, allowing cleaner energy, better housing. India has one of the flattest cities living. Like, it's barely, our average is less than 10 meters, right? If you compare with any of the other emerging markets, they're like 10 times as much. Forget New York and Tokyo. So there is a lot of growth still going to happen. And I think the next phase of CapEx that we are going to see from the government as well will no longer be intercity connectivity, highways and ports and so on. It's going to go towards cities, within the cities.
I know that we are out of time, but just 2 tweets. One is on this. For example, countries like Italy, we are the country of bell towers. We have a lot of cities, can be an interesting partner for urban services, urban planning, and quality of life of new urban developments. And second, you are the flag bearer of Global South. We should collaborate more and more in third countries, mainly in Africa. We have, as Italy, a very ambitious program called Mattei Plan that is peer-to-peer partnerships. And I think we could do much more together. Spanning from water management, precision agriculture, biofuel, artificial intelligence. For example, we created the hub in Rome with UNDP on AI for sustainable development. And so what we do is to put our supercomputers at the disposal of the African countries to multiply the use cases and to be beneficiary, not only exploited in the AI equation.
That's fantastic. We are 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 43 seconds above time. So thank you very much. In conclusion, I acknowledge that Europe is now working very hard at reducing, if not fully dismantling, the European bureaucracy, not each country, but European bureaucracy. And I see a lot of coverage in the Western press over the last 3-4 days, particularly with the current top bureaucrat. There is some dissatisfactions, but I shall not go there. So hopefully that will work as much as our project to sort out our bureaucracy works and our systems. And Shamika, since you talked about moving from villages to cities and people still having a stake in the village status, I would comment to everybody. It's all available on internet. You can Google it. The debates between Gandhi and Ambedkar on rural and urban India, and what a battle Ambedkar fought in the end to prevent Indian constitution from becoming a Gram Swaraj constitution. Because Gandhi's idea was every village is sovereign. Ambedkar's idea was every citizen is sovereign. And those are very testy debates. So I think anybody who has a stake should take a look at those. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. And of course, my panelists were chosen because they are stellar.
Thank you, Shekhar. Thank you.
A big thank you, His Excellency Antonio Bartoli, Dr. Shamika Ravi, and Mr. Shekhar Gupta for that fantastic conversation on the changing global order and India's place with it. Let's give them a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, I would like to request Mr. Yogesh Munjal to please join us on stage to present a small token of appreciation to our speakers, please. His Excellency, if you could please stay back with us on stage. Dr. Shamika, can we please have you center stage? We would like to present a small token to extend our gratitude towards you. Thank you. And we have Mr. Fali Munjal also joining Mr. Yogesh Munjal for the presentation. A big thank you to our panelists once again. Thank you so much, Mr. Munjal and Mr. Fali Munjal for doing the honors. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're taking a quick 10-minute coffee break. So it's time to connect with each other over coffee. But we request you to please be back on time as we would like to stay ahead of our schedule. And also for all that is part of the agenda of the 16th Mind Summits, the notepads that have been shared with you have QR codes on them. You can scan them and stay on the top of the proceedings of the Mind Summit. We'll see you in exactly 10 minutes from now.